Welcome to the Soulbody Wholeness Podcast.
Each episode is a living, breathing transmission. Together, we will explore deep, nuanced, and controversial topics of the soul. Welcome to your community of sensitive seekers and deep feelers.
Welcome back, old friend.
All right. Welcome to the show, my friends. Seriously, welcome. If it's your first time here, my name is Joshua, and I am your host, as well as the founder of Soulbody Wholeness. And if you're returning to the show, then as always, welcome back, old friend. Today's going to be another solo episode, which I'm really stoked on, you guys. And I swear it's not because no one wants to be on my show. I'm just feeling so freaking inspired by my work. I made a post in a newsletter recently about this, but this is the first year that a word of the year has come through. And it didn't happen last New Year's. It came through while I was sitting in meditation maybe a week ago. And that word is alignment. Alignment. And as you've heard me speak to before, going from concept to embodiment is so juicy. Guys, I used to live in a world of concepts, okay? And I thought I was hot shit just because I knew all the deep and spiritual concepts. But I just understood them mentally through often regurgitating all the words of masters. And I was really excited by these concepts, but I didn't have my own understanding of them that I could just speak freely on. I was regurgitating. And this past year, I have felt such an embodiment of so many concepts that I can just speak on them from my own experience without the whole regurgitation process. And that's pretty fucking cool. And so one of those words is alignment. Now, I've done a lot of inner work. I've done a lot of purification. I've healed and integrated a lot of my trauma. And I've really learned how to listen to my soul. So that's been a few years of that process, going really, really deep inwardly. And so for the first time, it feels like the first time, my outer environment is finally matching that frequency. And I am in constant awe of what keeps manifesting. Is opportunities, the relationships, the clients that I never would have even prayed for, but it's far better than what my mind could have come up with, what I could have conceived. And all that work I've done with myself, including a commitment to a writing process, has unlocked such coherence in my work, my offerings, my methodology, my cosmology, just my deeper, greater body of work and how I want to present it to the world. And so today is going to be an experiment in that, and we'll see if I can deliver on what I just claimed. So through all of my work and offerings, there has been this natural arc that I've been tracking for many years, and I've had it mirrored and validated and verified in all of the certifications and programs I took that were in my highest alignment. Those have really come through over the past few years, just feeling such a resonance and a reflection of all of these themes and giving me even more maps to go more deeply within them. And so that arc that I've tracked is what I call from healing to wholeness to service. And so there is a natural progression on the spiritual path that goes from more of a focus on healing, then wholeness, then service. And the three are also always interconnected, and they rarely actually exist within isolation. But there is a chapter in life for each of them to just be more heavily focused on. And when we get out of the way, when we stop trying to figure out, well, which chapter should I be in? The most appropriate area of focus for the specific moment naturally reveals. See, many of us who are deep on the spiritual path did not immediately have any intention of being spiritual. A lot of us originally just wanted to feel better. There was something about our situation that did not feel good, that caused a lot of suffering. And whether that was physical, emotional, mental, situational, or a culmination of all of it, we experienced many cycles of suffering. You know what I'm talking about if you're listening to this podcast. And we felt stuck and we felt trapped within that suffering for a long, long time, probably lifetimes. And at some point, we experienced a depth of suffering that was too intolerable to continue with. And so we started making conscious decisions to try to feel better using healthier alternatives than we had in our past, such as numbing out with food, alcohol, substances, sex, TV binging, et cetera, et cetera. And so this was my initial path into spirituality. I experienced many years of existential confusion and dread, major depression, social and general anxiety, chronic pain, debilitating fatigue, chronic gut inflammation, chronic gut issues, and this crippling insecurity that impacted every single area of my life that was really deeply rooted in my core wound, which is at my deepest core, I fully believe that I was nothing, that I had no value to contribute, no passion, no driving force, no definition that made me me. And the story that I believed was also that everyone else had this thing that made them a human. Everyone else had this thing that gave them something of value to contribute, made them interesting, but I did not. And so I adapted and molded myself around that belief. I was a wildly different person with each person I came into contact with in order to try to connect with them. I was always wearing masks and telling lies and fabricating all of these stories about who I was. And at the core, I was running from this story that I couldn't let anyone find out the truth about me. And so trying to keep all these stories and illusions together really created and sustained this chronic state of stress deep in my system. From this core wound birthed many, many secondary wounds and many, many limiting stories. Here's a few of mine that I've been able to identify and distill down to just a few sentences. I have to mold myself and lie about who I am in order to be loved and accepted. If people find out the truth about who I am, I will be rejected. My truest self is not worthy of love. So, struggle, stress, strife, lying, they all became these normalized states for me. They became these states that I unconsciously was associating with the experience of gaining love and acceptance. Can you see how that happened? How the chronic stress, the struggle, the fear were all of these states that I was beginning to associate with how I was going to get my ultimate needs for love met. And so, in order to cope with these chronic states of suffering cycles, I consumed a myriad of addictive habits: alcohol, substances, junk food, porn, sex, TV addiction, all of it. Until one day, I experienced the depth of my suffering through a 4-year relationship that culminated in a short term marriage ending at 22. And so that relationship was the ultimate definition of trauma bond. And the rupture of it was the most confronting moment of my life that absolutely demanded my change. It demanded that I look at it. I could not look away from dealing with my pain any longer. And so there were two choices that came through. One would be just to end it all, to finally kill myself, as I had thought about so very often throughout my life. Or I could actually try something new. I could face my anxieties, face my fears. I could start making healthier choices with my daily life. And so this was the Great Awakening into my path of healing. So let's go over healing. The dictionary definition of healing is the process of making or becoming sound or healthy again. So let's break down some components of healing. There are parts of you that feel severed and fragmented. They feel separate from the world, which is just a projection of how they feel separate from you. These severed parts of you were birthed from trauma, and then they sustained life from the myriad of protection strategies and beliefs that we piled on the original trauma. And trauma is simply an experience that you had that you never fully processed and metabolized. That's it. It doesn't have to be the rape or the murder. It can be a whole myriad of so many things, right? Now, in most forms of spirituality, they would refer to these severed parts as your ego. Now, I believe that's a problematic understanding of the ego because it's incomplete and it leads to this demonization of the ego. Your ego is a fully necessary part of your human experience. It's how you experience yourself in a subject object world. It's your center of gravity from which you experience form. It's how you bring the higher dimensions of spirit and your soul mission into form. It's not a mistake or a problem to eradicate. Now, it does contain, as I said, unhealed and fragmented parts that can become very problematic if left unchecked. When we identify with those parts as the entirety of who we are, this is what causes all the violence and terror in the world, or in your personal world, and in your personal world. But when we heal those parts, the ego becomes the greatest servant for our soul's greatest work. So the first step into a mature and healthy ego expression is turning our attention towards healing the parts of us that have been wounded. This is the essential first step in becoming more whole and being able to actually support the healing of the world. So for me, at this time of my awakening, at this time of my healing, all I primarily cared about was just feeling better. And that was completely appropriate for the level of maturity that I was at, as well as the amount of unhealed wounding that I was carrying. It would not have been appropriate for me to be working on serving the world. And in some regards, it wouldn't have been appropriate to rely on my inner resourcing of wholeness quite yet without knowing how to even do that. So, this is a very controversial topic, and I have an opinion on it. I take issue with the fact that we have so many people carrying around mountains of unprocessed wounding and trauma, and then they feel triggered and activated by what's happening in the world, which is understandable. So they immediately go into reaction and they try to make change from that level of consciousness. Their nervous systems are vibrating at a very dense survival based level of frequency. And because the issues in the world were created from that level of unhealed wounding, that level of consciousness, they're vibrating in that same level of frequency. And so when those two come together, all it does is create and amplify polarity. Each side of the battle is feeding the other. That's not a way to solve the problems in the world. The best way to address the issues of the world is to meet them with a higher frequency without the charge of our unprocessed wounding. So, allowing the issues of the world and in our daily lives to trigger us and to bring up our wounding that was previously hidden from us in our shadow, it's actually the perfect, brilliant system for healing and wholeness if we have the proper perspective and if we are equipped to address these inner woundings as they arise. This is where healing and eventually wholing come into play. All right, so back to my story. For the next several years after my awakening into healing, I was on a healing path. It began with a commitment to myself to change my exercise and diet habits. And so, if you've heard me speak to this before, I went very deep into these realms as my immediate experience was I felt much better, but they had a cap. And for years, I kept trying to use them to fix all of my problems, to heal my suffering, to fill my voids, and to just make me feel better. But what was being called forth was a deeper dimension of healing, looking at my emotions, my relationships, my communication, working with therapists and enrolling in courses and programs and establishing a deeper connection to my body and regulating my nervous system. This is a massive component of healing and wholeness that isn't well understood or talked about in our culture, even in all of the alternative healing fields. So, as we work on healing, at some point, we do start to feel better. We'll feel less symptoms. But if we continue the healing process, there's a deeper dimension of unhealed parts from our shadow that gets excavated and revealed. And this will manifest as new symptoms. Even if the symptoms look the same, it's a new set of symptoms. Now, most Western culture people will look at this as a problem, like they're going backwards. I know that I certainly did. That's why I kept doubling down on the fitness and diet. But if I had a proper wholeness guide at the time that really understood how these cycles of healing work in spirals, I would have been guided to allow the new symptoms to just manifest. I would have been told that this is natural and that we go through many cycles of feeling better, then feeling symptoms, then feeling better as we go deeper and deeper into all the depth of our wounding and unprocessed life experiences. Folks, this is a true healing journey. It is not a quick fix path to get you back in the game, back to how you were living your life. And this isn't just some set of symptoms to simply overcome. This path will teach and mentor you. It will mold and shape you into becoming a wiser, more empowered being with depth. This isn't meant to take you back to how you were living your life. It's meant to reveal a bigger, deeper, and more fulfilling way of life that is right for you. And so, yeah, this is the path of maturity, the path of becoming an actual contributing adult. And actual adults at the psycho-spiritual level of development are becoming more and more rare to find these days. Maybe you've noticed. So the years that I spent doubling down on the fitness, the diet, the supplements, they also had a really big cap for how far I could go with my healing because I was just looking at all these quick fix outer strategies versus going deeply within myself to find my own inner healer and my own inner guidance. Ironically, this was because I was attempting to fix my life at the level of wounded consciousness that I was operating from within my mind. I eventually and very slowly was turning towards the learning of and even more slowly implementing all of the methods of holding myself, coming into my wholeness. So let's break that down for a moment. The dictionary definition of wholeness is the state of forming a complete and harmonious whole. Unity, the state of being unbroken or undamaged. So we are all born with an innate part of ourselves that never truly dies. This is the part of ourselves that is already whole and unbroken. It's the part of ourselves that cannot actually be separated from the unconditional love of all that is. And so when I say holing, I'm referring to the practice of tapping into that part of ourselves as a resource to heal the fragmented and the wounded parts of ourselves. It's a paradox. You have both. So you're bringing those parts back into wholeness. And instead of looking externally, we resource from within. We actively practice connecting with the transpersonal part of ourself that is loving and whole. And we all have an innate wholeness that we can tap into. The problem is that most of us have been fed so much conditioning that we need to find that source outside of ourselves. Now, obviously, this has some significant roots in religious conditionings. You're born inherently sinful and separate from holiness and God, and that you must repent for your sins, and you must get your connection to God through an external channel, aka the church. Other interconnected roots of these belief systems come from our Western industrial complex and our corporatized, commercialized, and commodified culture that most of us grew up in. We are constantly fed the message that we are incomplete. We have a pain and a void inside of us that can only be fixed and can only be filled by buying and consuming something externally. Does that sound familiar? So, the culmination of this massive and complex web of conditioning makes it very easy to see that most of us have no idea that we have innate access to the kingdom within. We have an innate inner adult that is a healed and mature ego, and it is a channel and a servant of God, of soul, and of all the loving support from all of our unseen guides and allies and angels and spirit animals, all of our healed and well ancestors. They're right there for us to tap into. And so, as we continue to do the work of connecting with that part of ourselves, we fortify that connection. We begin to trust that connection. And so we begin to bridge the wholeness to the unhealed. And it becomes easier and more natural and more efficient, just quicker. And so we'll find ourselves needing the support of the outside, of others, of our friends, of our family, of our therapist, of our coaches, much less often. And when we utilize them, we know exactly what we need them for. It's less of this whole experimental, just sit down and see what's on your mind and talk for an hour and not get very far. You're guided in the exact reflections that you need from your support systems in the real world, your coaches and your guides. As a result, we become far less codependent in all of our relationships. And so, as I mentioned before, healing, wholeness, and service are all interconnected, and they're not always going to feel like you're just fully embodied in one and you just move in some linear fashion. As I experienced more holing, I was coming into deeper and deeper dimensions of unhealed parts of myself. And after several years of doing this work, I discovered a wound and a void that wanted something more than just feeling better. I was tuning into this desire to support others in feeling better. And so I didn't know exactly how I would do that, but I tried and experimented with a bunch of career path trainings that, supported others in feeling better. And so from that, a more holistic form of personal training emerged. I became this holistic personal trainer, and there was more of a focus on lifestyle habits and emotional regulation, corrective exercise, corrective posture, rest and recovery. And even though I was helping people at some level, this inner void and wounding actually grew stronger. I began to really long deeply for knowing what it is that I am supposed to do, me personally, not just service, but how am I supposed to serve? And I began to grow very tired of just guessing and sort of connecting to it, feeling like I'm on my way, but it doesn't quite fill this void. There's something deeper. I wanted to know my exact purpose. I wanted to know how I am supposed to serve and contribute. And I felt very bitter and angry at the time for not knowing. And I naively thought that my willingness should have been enough to be just given my assignments and given my career path from God. Like, why is that not happening? Instead, the gift I eventually received was that of disillusion. My whole life came apart. It came apart at the seams. My long term relationship came to this devastating end, and a lot of my close friendships that I had developed shifted, and my roles in my community that I had come to know myself by were just crumbling. And I was feeling this devastating chronic fatigue and just this disinterest in my career as a personal trainer. So, did a little soul searching. I traveled to Costa Rica, and very quickly, I was just gifted the next step of what I'm supposed to do. I was told by God or my soul, I'm not sure which, but it came through very clearly that I needed to sell all my things. I needed to leave the personal trainer business behind. And I needed to start roaming the world in a state of pure unknowingness, to just surrender, to let it all go. And so, this part of my story sort of highlights all the nuancedness of the interconnectedness of healing, wholeness, and service by sincerely asking the question of how can I serve? My soul guided me into a several year initiation process to discover and embody the answer to that question. And along the way, I experienced a ton of healing and holing before I was allowed to be able to serve. I met a lot of my deepest unhealed parts. I felt lifetimes of unprocessed feelings, the grief, the rage, the terror, the anxiety, the hopelessness. I experienced many of the cycles of healing to wholeness that I shared about, the symptoms coming and going and coming and going. And what was occurring over the course of several years was this mentorship in how I am supposed to serve. So, on my way to service, I was being initiated into the depths of learning about healing and wholeness. And I was embodying these teachings, these things that used to be concepts during my days as a personal trainer, concepts that I read about and tried to teach others. And so, if we are to move into soul based leadership, we must be embodied in what we are serving because service is leadership. And leadership means going first, it means taking the medicine that you want to share and then becoming that medicine and then becoming a carrier of that medicine and becoming a carrier of your frequency. And your frequency, which I'll call your genius frequency, is the mission and the essence of your soul being carried out by your healed, immature ego. All right, so just let that simmer for a moment. We're going to talk about the wholeness piece. So, throughout my soul initiation, I had to massively show up for myself. No other human could do it. I had to learn how to develop a deep relationship with my inner adult, my soul, with God, and with my unseen support team. I had to learn about energetic hygiene and sovereignty and how I had picked up so much energy and limiting beliefs from so many lifetimes, and how I had come to identify with those beliefs all my life. And so once I did the deep work of disentangling from all that conditioning, for the first time ever, I came into deep contact with my own energy. I found myself. I found what made me me. Now, remember way back when I shared with you that this was my exact core wound, that I used to fully believe that I had nothing that made me me, nothing of value to contribute. And the thing that I feared was so true about me was the exact catalyst for me to go into this deep soul mentorship on how to heal that wound and how to heal it for others, how to find what makes me me, even when so much of what makes up me believes that that doesn't actually exist. Can you see how valuable that would be to someone with a similar core wound or any wounds around identity, value, worthiness, belonging, purpose? You know, all the big existential woes so many humans face. This is now my greatest gift and contribution to support people stuck in these wounds to move from healing to wholeness to service. And this is such a massive component of how to get to your service, how your core wound becomes your sacred wound and eventually becomes your sacred power. And so now I can support people in connecting with their own sovereignty. Now, this is a word that I did not understand for the longest time. I actually had a lot of aversion to it because I thought that it sounded really lonely and cold. It kind of made a person sound like an asshole. Like, if I'm sovereign, then I don't care about how my actions affect others. So that's a very limited and distorted view on sovereignty that I was carrying. Connecting with your sovereignty is connecting with your deepest truths. It's developing a secure and healthy relationship with that part of you that's connected to the transpersonal. And once you understand that that part of you is a fractal, perfect expression of all that is, of God, Great Spirit, it becomes very natural to just trust the guidance of that part of you. That part of you is connected to your deepest level soul truth. And as such, it will guide your way. And it can be trusted that if you enact truths from this place, then any impact that it has on another person or on the collective is in the highest good for the others and for the collective. All right, breathe into this and tread lightly here if you don't have any of your own personal connection to sovereignty. Out of all the spiritual terms to get trapped in a concept by, this is one of the trickiest ones. I'm doing my best to put it into words, but essentially, to be sovereign is to be resourced from deep within. And I sometimes call this the vertical axis. So to be in this trusting, loving relationship with God and the angelic support team from the upper world, from above. To be in a trusting, loving relationship with your soul and your spirit guides from the underworld, from the lower world down below. And to be in a loving, trusting relationship with your innate wholeness, also known as your inner adult, your healed, immature ego from the middle world. To be in sovereignty means that your vertical axis support team is your primary life partner. And anyone that you connect with at a human level in this lifetime is a secondary life partner. Again, I used to project onto these concepts as sounding so cold or detached, and experiencing them in a really embodied way feels like liberation. It feels like alignment with truth that I can trust. It is far better living like this. I spent so many years in so many super codependent relationships that I used to just romanticize and get lost in. And so that carried a lot of problems and suffering with it. And now I don't rely on my romantic partner to fulfill the needs that only God can actually take care of. And I'm so much happier this way. Okay. So hopefully by now you can see how healing, wholeness, and service follow this progression of focus depending on the life chapter that you're at. And at any point, you can be working on any of them, especially once you've gotten to that place of a solid connection to your wholeness and service. Then it can be quite cyclical, depending on your life chapter, and it can include all the elements of any of them throughout the whole day, just like going right through the cycle. I'm still healing and holing, of course, but because of my deep connection to my wholeness and to my service, my relationship to my healing is completely different than it used to be. I see and accept it and celebrate it as a natural part of my life, as this opportunity for learning and growth and connection. And yeah, I don't see it as this big obstacle to overcome to get somewhere else anymore. I'm anchored in the present momentness of it. All right, let's finish this out strong by diving more deeply into service. Asking the question to a power beyond yourself, what am I supposed to do with this one wild and precious life? As Mary Oliver would say, what is my purpose? Now, this is one of the most important questions to consistently ask yourself. And there are proper containers and ceremonies and rituals where you can really amplify the power of this question to go even deeper into yourself and to actually receive guidance. So if you're just asking this question over and over again while staying completely plugged into the matrix 24/7, never giving yourself time and space and nature away from noise and distraction, you won't actually be able to hear the response. And you probably won't get very far with the question. As we move through the healing, wholeness, service arc, we journey through the 3 types of purpose. Now, I'm not going to dive super deep into these today. That will be for some future podcasts and teachings. But the 3 types of purpose that every human has the capacity to run their life by, or to have their life run by, are default purpose, created purpose, and soul purpose. Now, most modern people stay stuck living and dying in their default purpose. Some people will move beyond that into a created purpose. But the ones who do the deep healing and wholeness work, well, they will have an opportunity to discover, enact, and fulfill their soul purpose. I have found this purpose map, this purpose cosmology, to be profoundly useful with myself and my clients. And I received it during my training with the Purpose Guides Institute. So, shout out to Jonathan Gustin, who has created a masterpiece of a soul purpose school and amazing soul purpose programs. So, your default purpose is basically all of the protection patterns that you've acquired from all of your unprocessed trauma, and you combine that with all of the conditioning that you've inherited from your family, from your culture, from the media, et cetera, et cetera. It's basically all the masks and identities and limiting beliefs that make up the personality complex of your unhealed and immature ego parts. Luckily, there are processes that you can go through to identify and bring light to these parts of yourself and to even distill them down into some rather shocking default purpose statements. And when you do this, it's really mind boggling to see that this is the purpose that is running your life, or at least a significant amount of it. And so, for instance, when I went through this process, I saw that many of my statements basically were saying that the purpose of my life is to be the best and get others to think that I'm the best at all costs. It's the only way I'll be loved and accepted. And that I can't let anyone find out who I am beneath all the masks. Like I was saying at the beginning, like all of those statements I made about my core wound, that's my default purpose. From that deep belief births all of these protection patterns to protect that vulnerability and to be loved and accepted from the outside world. So, some amount of default purpose is perfectly natural and okay, even in a really healed and whole person. There is a part of me that wants others to like me. There's a part of me that wants the security of having money and having my basic needs met. It's when these are the primary fuel of your whole life, that's where we find a problem because they cannot sustain and fulfill you, not very deeply. There's a very limited cap. And for me, those are not my primary fuel. So, created purpose is the purpose that you consciously created for yourself. And it was most likely birthed from things that you have an interest or a passion in. And this is usually in the form of a very tangible job or career. So, for many people, they've been living a life that they dreaded for a really long time, working a job that they hated just for the security and the safety. And maybe they felt fear of going after their dreams. And so for me, that dream was personal training. I had to take a chance and quit my job that I hated and go back to school to get certified and follow what felt like at the time my dream. It really excited me at the time to be supporting people doing what I did for myself. It was a passion for me. So I figured, yeah, that makes sense. That would make sense for me to do, to serve others in that way. And so many programs and coaches that talk about purpose and have exercises for people to find their life purpose. I would challenge that and say you are finding your created purpose. You're finding something that lights you up, and it's an improvement. It's an improvement from simply living by default purpose because you're beginning to take your life into your own hands. You're beginning to walk forward towards something. It's a natural progression to get to soul purpose, but it too has a cap and a limitation. At some point, there will most likely be a stirring and an ache and a void that you feel that's asking you to go even deeper. It certainly did for me, as I shared earlier. And so that brings us into soul purpose. Soul purpose cannot be consciously chosen by you. It is revealed to you. And it's not typically a tangible thing like a career. Now, careers can be fully aligned delivery methods and really powerful instruments for you to deliver your soul purpose. But your actual soul purpose is really impossible to encapsulate or limit with words. It's highly mythopoetic, meaning that it's usually revealed to you in imagery and dreams and symbols and mythology and poetic words. You start to feel it in your deep imagination, and your imaginal faculties come online. And it usually requires ceremonies and rituals and deep nature connection to be able to actually hear and receive it. And when you receive it, it's not like you just know what you need to do and how to act. These images and poetry have to take time to work on you, to break down your healed and whole ego so that it can evolve and refine and become this servant for the soul mission. And so it usually actually takes a huge initiation process that can last several years to truly embody it so it doesn't just become this interesting memory of images that you had during the ceremony. It takes this devotion and this tending and developing this relationship with. And so you have to show up for it consistently. And when you do, it reveals more and more. And eventually, the crystallizations of these messages begin to form, meaning that you are given very specific, tangible action steps to take out in the middle world, the tangible and the practical. But it's a real process to get to that point. And that process is so intelligent. It's a process of mentoring and teaching you all along the way. It's helping you to understand and refine your gifts at every level. Every level has these gatekeepers. And once you have passed your mini initiation, the gatekeepers allow you to the next level. And then you finally get to the point where it's like, oh, I know what these images are pointing me towards. I know where I'm going. And sometimes it's just a little bit of a flickering lantern in a really dark room, but it's enough to know what step to take next. And so, a fundamental quality of your soul purpose is that it's a contribution, it's a giveaway, it is a service. And it's not just any service, it's your service. It's what you can do better than anyone else. You were born to do it the best. And it's the deepest, most authentic you being you and doing you. And it's a very specific frequency, your unique genius frequency, that the entire universe is actually incomplete without you coming into alignment with your genius frequency. So let that sink in. All right. Believe it or not, that is a very small window into service and purpose. As I said before, I'm going to do more on those later, but this was a very good introduction. And this is how I work with people. And it's beautiful because each one of my offerings offers more of a focus on healing, or more of a focus on wholeness, or more of a focus on service. But if you go into any one of them, you're going to experience all three of them in the perfect ratio that your body and your soul reveals. So if you'd like to learn more about that, learn more about my work, you can visit my website. All of my links to find out about what I do, who I am, who I serve, you'll find it in the show notes. Whew. That was a lot of fun, and that was a lot of energy. That was a lot of brain power. Thank you for listening. I love you all, and until next time, stay blessed, my friends. Thank you for joining me on the Soulbody Wholeness Podcast. If you like this episode, you can support the journey by rating and subscribing wherever you listen. I invite you to follow me on Instagram at Soulbody Wholeness for more insights and to stay up to date with my current offerings. And if you feel called to work with me directly, I invite you to visit my website at www.soulbodywholeness.life. I offer somatic alchemy sessions and soul purpose initiation journeys that awaken your inner healer, reconnect you to your innate wholeness, and ignite your soul's deepest purpose. I invite you to carry this resonance with you as you move throughout your day, and return anytime you need a reminder of your courage, your wholeness, and your light. Blessings, old friend.